Why do you think that people do tend to blame victims for their victimisation?
Well, there are a number of explanations for that. One that's been put forward is the just world theory, which suggests that as a general proposition, most of us believe that we live in a fairly just world, and that bad things happen to bad people and good things happen to good people. So if crime is a bad thing and someone becomes a victim of crime, then we tend to have this perception that maybe there's something bad about that particular person or something bad about what they did. Mm-hmm. The just world theory goes a little further than that and points out that for many people, if they do become a victim of crime, it shatters some of their fundamental assumptions about the world in which we live. Mm. Another way of looking at it is an extension of that bad and good, which is attribution theory, where we tend to attribute to people based on assumptions, whether that be moral judgments or whether it be influenced by some other means or stimuli, that we make assessments about people. Mm. And a classic example of that is where a young woman might be sexually assaulted at 3 a.m. walking along Hindley Street. Mm-hmm. And there will be people who will go, well, who would be out at 3 a.m. in the morning? I bet she was wearing a short skirt and all of those things. So all we're doing is attributing characteristics to that person, and with that attribution, we're shifting the blame away from the person who actually perpetrated the crime to the victim. And a victim, from a victimological perspective, not only is that incorrect, but always the person who perpetrated the crime should be the person in terms of the focus of attention for that decision. In terms of victimology, one of the issues for us as for social scientists is what can we best do to match the needs of that person on the one hand, but the other, going back to some of those earlier theories in victimology around studying what role a victim played in the actual crime itself. Were they actively involved? Did they precipitate it? Was there something that they did that was a stimulus that caused, well, caused is the wrong word, that contributed to the circumstance in which the crime happened? Well, some of those questions are fundamental to trying to work out how we advise people to reduce their risk. But whenever
in a non-victim blaming way.
In a non-victim blaming way. And I think it's important that it's done in a non-victim blaming way. And the feminist writings around preventing of sexual assaults, they've been very clever, for want of a better term, in how they've been able to walk that tightrope between being seen to be blaming the victim, but at the same time providing useful information to reduce risk to those people who in particular are vulnerable.
Yes. So you've been working with victims, I guess, since the 1970s. So how do you see that society's responses to victims have changed in that time?
Well, if we take policing as a sort of indicative of some of the changes in society as a whole, in policing we've seen a fundamental shift from police being crime fighters, and within the crime fighting paradigm of policing, victims are predominantly witnesses who you call on for the purpose of helping the state make a prosecution, and other than that you keep them just quietly to one side. To now, police seeing themselves as service providers, they provide a suite of services to victims of crime. There are dedicated victim contact officers. They make active referral when they attend crime scenes of victims to different services to assist them. They have agreements with Rape and Sexual Assault Service or Child Protection Services to ensure that we not only address the needs of the criminal justice system in an evidentiary sense, but we also address the needs of the victim of crime. And there's an overlap, a small overlap between those, but also as the case is investigated, it progresses, if it does in some cases through the criminal justice system. Running parallel to that are a number of rehabilitative and assistance needs that the victims of crime have. And we've become far more sophisticated in how we attend to those things. We've also seen the influence of victims' rights, so that has contributed, for example, in terms of transition from victims being told what health and welfare services were available to assist them, to then having an entitlement to be told about the investigation, the progress of criminal proceedings, and being told about key decisions that affected them, to today victims can often be actively engaged and involved in influencing those decisions. They should be consulted on their safety concerns around bail. They should be consulted around whether the prosecutor's going to accept a plea to a lesser charge or even tender no evidence at all. In sentencing, they can make a victim impact statement, but in addition to that, they can comment on sentence. And when it comes to the issue of parole of prisoners, victims can make submissions not only about their safety concerns, but also about information that they may feel will assist the parole board in making its decision whether a person should be released. And I think that is indicative. If one thinks that it took hundreds of years to construct our adversarial criminal justice system in less than 4 decades, that's a very significant change in the way that we perceive the victim in terms of not only their needs but their entitlements.